Hello and welcome to this edition of Indago ResearchCast, where we highlight findings from our Indago supply chain research community. Transportation is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions for most companies. Per ton mile, trucking produces more CO2 emissions on average than other modes of freight transportation, except for air cargo. Do you currently measure CO2 emissions per shipment? What is the primary driving force to measure those emissions? And does your transportation management system take CO2 emissions into consideration in mode, carrier, and equipment selection? We asked those questions to members of our Indago supply chain research community, who are all supply chain logistics executives for manufacturing, retail, and distribution companies, as well as to members of Manhattan Associates TMS Product Council. And the findings of the research are summarized in an ebook published by Manhattan Associates, which we'll provide the link to. So I encourage you to download and read the report for all the insights that came out of the research. In this research cast, I'm happy to welcome Bryant Smith, who's Director of Product Management at Manhattan Associates, to share his key takeaways from the research results. So Bryant, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for having me, and happy to be with you again and talking about this important topic.
Absolutely. Well, this is a topic that is certainly top of mind for many supply chain logistics executives. Certainly I think over the past 2 years, even during COVID, when we had a lot of virtual conferences, but certainly now back in in-person conferences, this is a topic that there's always at least one session, sometimes a whole track devoted to, the role of sustainability and greenhouse gas emissions and so forth in supply chain logistics. So it is top of mind for a lot of executives and a lot of companies as well. So let's kind of dive right into some of the findings from the survey. And the first thing is that the survey results indicate that very few companies currently measure the CO2 emissions of their shipments, with cost, I guess not surprising, still being the primary driver for mode, carrier, and equipment selection. So I guess the first question is, does that surprise you? And secondly, why aren't more companies doing this?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't surprised by the results. When we talk to customers, when we talk to partners and other players in the ecosystem, over the last couple of years, where the economy has been, where the freight rates have been, where the capacity has been, it's no surprise that a lot of companies were just trying to keep their freight rates low, especially in that type of market. They weren't willing to make that trade-off to maybe pay a little bit more to have a more sustainable mode of transportation or equipment or the like. So, now that it's starting to get into a softer market, we're having, the conversations about, okay, we have room to give a little bit on our freight rates. We're getting positive feedback from our carriers. Do we now have the opportunity to pick up this topic again? Now that's a little bit softer market. So no, I wasn't surprised by the results, but I think maybe we're seeing a little bit of trend moving in a positive direction here coming into the near future.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that the survey results, some of the comments posted by the executives kind of underscore, the points that you just made there. Certainly, when you're talking about, second half of 2020, all of 2020, 2021, a lot of companies, their transportation budgets were completely shot. They were paying, incredible rates. So I think, in some ways, this whole area of greenhouse gas emissions and so forth got pushed to the background because they were all just trying to get product where it needed to be at the lowest cost, possible. But I think you're right. I think that, I think that now that the pendulum has moved in the other direction, I think companies are revisiting, this topic. Another big limiting factor that came out of the results is that many transportation management systems have lacked sustainability-related, capabilities, historically. So, for example, the ability to take CO2 emissions into account, during mode and carrier optimization and selection. The good news is that I think we're starting to see innovation in this area. And earlier this year, I was at the Manhattan Momentum Conference. And there at the conference, you introduced some sustainability, capabilities as part of your latest TMS update. Can you share with us a little bit, some of the details around that?
So I think there's kind of a common misconception that, if you want to have more of a sustainable, let's say, routing pattern or route path, is you have to pay more to do it. And what we're educating our customers on and our partners on is, That's not always the case. So I'll give you an example is if we had a shipment that was moving truckload from point A to point B on a particular lane, but if we were able to work with the customer or the consignee about when can we deliver that, we could do a mode shift from truckload to rail, which, by the way, is cheaper. You're not paying more for it, but also it's a more sustainable path. It has less emissions. So I think, in terms of which carriers are being selected, which equipment's being selected, which mode is being selected, is you don't always have to pay more to be more sustainable. So how can we, within the TMS space, surface that information to the end user so that they can make that informed decision? In some cases, you don't have a choice. You have to meet an expected delivery date and you have to choose the mode that goes along with that. But if you're able to work with your customer and you're able to work with the stores that you replenish and things of that nature, is there's opportunity to make those decisions in the planning process and in the routing process so that you don't need to make that trade-off. You actually win in both scenarios. So, what are we doing in terms of the TMS is surfacing that information to the user, providing them information at the time of routing, at the time of planning, and the time of execution so that they can make the right decisions for what's appropriate for their business, staying within their budget, but also servicing their customers in the way that they need to be serviced. Whether you're incorporating that into your optimization engines or your algorithms, or whether you're partnering with EPA SmartWay, it's surfacing that information for the users to make informed decisions.
I like that point, surfacing the information, because I think that's been the critical constraint, is that companies have lacked visibility to that type of data around greenhouse gas emissions to really make informed decisions or to understand the trade-offs and so forth. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember correctly, part of the data that you're using, because this came out in the survey results as well, where companies saw the lack of data and standards, let's say, as another constraint. But you've partnered, in terms of the data that you use within the TMS, you've partnered with the EPA SmartWay. Yeah, is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So that's the problem, and that we've seen along the way is there's no uniform standard. And how do we report against it that it doesn't measure apples to oranges? But how we measure CO2 emissions in Europe is different than how we measure it here in North America. Is how do we get on the same playing field so that when we're reporting information back to our business, our partners, or different regulatory bodies, is how are we reporting it in a way that is compliant, but also in a way that is shared across the industry?
And I think the other thing I remember is that, typically when you're doing optimization selection, right, the classic trade-off is cost and service and lead time, right? And you're kind of balancing those things. And I think your approach is you come up with some kind of a factor or score that you come up with. But I think what came out of the update is that now you're also incorporating this greenhouse gas emission as part of the overall calculation that you do to provide this composite score that also now includes, in addition to cost and service, now includes greenhouse gas emissions. Is that correct?
Absolutely right. Is the users can go back into the application and configure how they want to be measured, where do they want to put their emphasis, so that not only does it mirror what their goals are for their business and meeting their business objectives, but also how can we stay within the confines of a common regulatory body to make sure that we're reporting out that information. So we've come up with a scoring system that allows you to have visibility back to that information, but also taking that output of what that scoring system is to factor into the algorithm and the optimization, so that again you're staying compliant, but also you're meeting your business goals and objectives.
Great. Well, I think going back to what you said at the beginning of your response to this question, I think that now just having this visibility and surfacing this data is the first step in all of this. And I think it's good to see that within the TMS realm that we're getting there. So shifting gears a little bit, I mean, although many of the companies are, in our response, in our survey, are currently not factoring CO2 emissions into their transportation, operations, the data and the feedback from the survey indicate that there's a growing expectation amongst logistics executives that measuring CO2 emissions of shipments will become a necessity soon. So what factors do you see driving this trend?
So, although folks don't have a large emphasis on this today, is how can we stay proactive so that when they do have a renewed or heightened interest, that the capability is already there for them, right? And a lot of those driving factors, where we're getting our information, making sure we're staying compliant and things of that nature, obviously the regulatory bodies, the government, different agencies are sometimes imposing, some of this reporting and monitoring and measuring. We see that far more in Europe than we do here in North America, but it is starting to be more prevalent in North America, especially when you're operating within, let's say, the state of California that has a lot of regulations intrastate in those types of movements as well. So not only is the government kind of imposing some of these regulations, but you kind of see some of these shippers and these companies coming up with their own sustainable goals. So, we have companies that are starting to have their own ESG reports and especially the publicly traded companies it's now part of their quarterly statement and how they're performing, and they give that information back to the stakeholders. So not only is the government kind of pushing on their end, but also it's kind of self-imposed on these shippers as well to make sure that they're meeting their goals and giving that value back to their stakeholders as well and shareholders. But also you start to see a little bit more pressure from the consumer and from the buyer is, they're putting those pressures on the shipper as well to make sure that, they're doing their part to have more sustainable routing. So I kind of see it in three different phases: the government, the shipper themselves, back to their shareholders, but also the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing the same thing, as well, not only from the feedback from this survey, but in other research that we've done, over the past couple of years, that those three things you highlighted there are really the three main drivers of this moving forward. Well, there's a lot that came out of the research results. Again, all of it is going to be summarized in an ebook that Manhattan Associates is going to publish, and the link will be provided along with this video. So again, I encourage everyone to download the report and read it and share your feedback on it as well. But as a way to wrap up, Bryant, what was your biggest takeaway from the survey's results, and what calls to action does it raise?
Yeah, so I want to go back to that last question that we asked in the survey, and that is, how important is your TMS and part of your sustainability goals, and how can your TMS help you achieve those goals, and what capabilities does it need to have? And nearly 75% of the respondents said it's important or extremely important or very important. So, that's an indication to us as TMS provider is, what do we need to do to make sure that the system's ready for those capabilities? So, we continue to meet with different stakeholders and analysts to understand what are the needs of the marketplace, and meeting with customers to understand their needs. But my call to action for folks is, if you're not in a TMS today, or your TMS doesn't provide those capabilities, what you should do is, at the very least, understand what your footprint is today. So, gathering the appropriate metrics. How much weight do we ship? How many miles do we ship against? What are our routing patterns? What type of equipment are we using? So there's information that you have at your fingertips today to understand your historical performance. You can easily understand, what type of impact you're having today as sort of a baseline. So once you have that baseline and you start making goals for the future, you have something to measure against. So I would say that's probably the nearest term call to action, is understanding how you operate today, so that when you do decide that this is something either the government's forcing or customers are forcing or shareholders are forcing, is we know how we're operating today, and we can now start formulating goals for the future.
Yeah, no, great advice. I think we come full circle. In my opening comments, I talked about how transportation is, for many companies, the biggest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions. And like so many things in supply chain management, it's always better to be proactive and prepared for, what seems to be, something that most companies, again, based on their research results, expect that they're going to be required to do at some point. But better to be prepared today and start putting the groundwork, for doing it, than, trying to be reactive and trying to catch up, down the road. So again, Bryant, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and perspective on the research results.
Thanks for having me, Adrian. Always nice to meet with you and chat with you.
Great. And thank you for watching this edition of Indago Research Cast, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode. Thank you very much.